Welcome into the Stack Shack Sports Show. It was another great weekend of Valorant. Some upsets, some surprising outcomes, some dominant performances. We're going to cover each and every one of them. And we'll take a look back at last week's tier list and see how we're going to adjust these rankings. There are going to be some adjustments. Some of them we kind of saw coming. Some of them were a bit unexpected. So let's get straight into it. The weekend's matches got over on Wednesday from Super Week. We talked about that last week. And then we jumped into just a quick Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We only had 5 games. Again, coming off a Super Week where we had a bunch of games. A little less to talk about. But Saturday, I think we got some clarity. G2 kicked it off by winning 2-0 over MIBR. Again, I've been critical of some of the roster moves that G2 has made. But, as we talked about last week, MIBR is not very good, and G2 solidified. Yes, they still can beat the teams that they are better than. I think they got a slightly worse by kind of caving to the Leaf decision to move off. But, to be fair, they are starting to settle into their roles, I think, a little better. Icy a +4 on the duelist. That's a little better than he's been recently. Leaf settling into his new role that he wanted to play. So a quick 2-0 of MIBR. MIBR is really struggling, and I think they were a bit of a surprise for a lot of us. I think they had a decent roster. You look at some of the additions they made in the offseason. It wasn't that bad. Like, we were kind of expecting them to be reasonable. Obviously, Loud is the major Brazilian team, but MIBR has had success in the past, and we thought they'd be pretty good. They just have not had a good regular season. This has not been, their year. I don't know. Does it need a coaching change, a roster change? I don't know. Again, I don't like making those big changes in season, but they got to figure something out because right now it's not really working. Then we had, I think, a bit of a surprise. Loud has been struggling. I mean, if you look at their last few matches, they're getting beat in Masters. They were one of the teams that qualified for the first global event. Did not do particularly great there. They did okay. They made some moves and won some rounds. But then they come back and they get waxed by NRG. Had me thinking, man, NRG must be on top of the world. But NRG hasn't been as good as we expected. Then they get beat by Cloud9. Then they beat by Kru. They then go on to 2-0 Sentinels over the weekend. And, it's tough to see what's happening, with Sentinels. These two teams were the two that made it out of Americas into the global event. Sentinels obviously winning that global event, but Sentinels not playing particularly well this regular season. 13-7... 13-8. I mean, these aren't particularly close. This is not like stunning tight matches, triple overtimes. They're just getting beat. I think the key for Sen is Zelsis. He was on fire early in the season, and I wouldn't say he's played bad. Second on the team on Lotus. That's okay. Icebox is pretty rough, but you're looking at all maps, and that's a tough score line. The other tough score line, though, if you look at how this map all worked together, is TenZ. -11. That's not really what I think we expect from TenZ to be that low. And interestingly enough, he's just kind of middle of the board. A -6 and then a -5. Zelsis struggled on Icebox, obviously from a KD perspective. It's tough. It's tough. I don't know what's going on with Sen because, we felt they were good. I do think a lot of it has to do with the amount of footage that's out there. People know how Sentinels wants to play their maps. And to be fair, I think maybe a little bit of that is Loud here too. Now, NRG, Cloud9, and Kru, I think are all pretty solid teams, right? Cloud9, I've been complaining about because, get them in the wrong, map and they can struggle. I think Cloud9 can get kind of, they just have these weird maps where they lose rounds they really shouldn't. But they can also be dominant. I mean, 13-4, 13-9 to finish it off. The bind wasn't even that terrible when they played. So Cloud9's a solid team. NRG's a solid team. Kru is a solid team. We're going to talk about them in a minute. They had a great performance against 100 Thieves. Maybe Loud isn't as bad as we thought, right? Their record was pretty bad, but they kind of played the opposite of what we were saying last week with Kru, where they had only played the bottom teams in the region. Well, Loud had kind of just played all the top teams in the region, and that Kru loss is looking even more reasonable after what they did to 100 Thieves. So, give Loud some credit. A lot of people have been really harsh on Quick. Had a good game. +7 there as the duelist. So that's impressive, right? Some of the comp picks are interesting. What's going on with Zelsis? I don't know. Zekin actually played pretty well. He's another, to me, a key player for how well Sentinels is going to do. But, across all maps, he was the only one that was even. And even as a duelist is pretty reasonable. That's okay, especially with how Sentinels plays. Raze and Jet, there you go. He's even. I'm not going to be too harsh on that. I think Tens and Zelsis struggled, and I don't know why Zelsis is struggling. I do think it really does have to do with how much footage is out on Sentinels. And let's be real, Sadak is an absolute menace when you give him time to prepare. One of the best IGLs. I know his scoreline isn't great, but he doesn't have to have a great scoreline. He's got to win. It is interesting, the people that are playing the KJs there on the bottom of their team. So maybe you don't give Zelsis too much of a hard time for that, because that's just how the rounds played out. I think maybe if you're looking for kind of a diff here, some differences in comps, right? Between some of these picks, and Tens and Saucy not keeping up with Quick and Kawazine. I think that's just how it works out. So that was, I think, clarifying that, some of the things we've been seeing out of Sentinels, they are struggling a bit. They need to find their way, maybe find some sort of a new strategy, a new play. The other thing is they're kind of knocked out of playoffs. That's a tough loss for Sentinels to go from winning the first global event to maybe not even making playoffs in their region following that. A bit tough. Cloud9. Remember how I said they can be dumb for one map, and against the best teams, that's probably going to come back and bite them? Yeah. Here's that map. They got 13-2'd by Furia. Furia, the team we ranked at the bottom. Team that, let's take a look here. 0-2, they got one map off of Kru, got 0-2'd, got 0-2'd. We can keep going. They haven't won a round since a Mickey Mouse tournament off-season kind of exhibition thing back in 2023. Back in November. They haven't won a game. Kickoff, 0-2'd, 0-2'd. By MIBR, who we're seeing is not that great. We thought at this point that maybe they were pretty good. Not really. They're not good. They should not get a map off of Cloud9. But Cloud9 has these maps. They, as a 12-0 half. They're lucky this wasn't a 13-0. Then what happens? They come back in 13-3 Furia and 13-8 Furia. Like they're supposed to. I don't know what to do with Cloud9. They just have these maps. And you saw when they played 100 Thieves, what happened. And I think when Cloud9 plays any of the top teams, be on the lookout for them to do something goofy and lose a map that they really shouldn't, or get completely blown out by probably the worst team in all of America's region. So they get the win, but I think it really, to me, solidifies exactly who Cloud9 is. They're a bit streaky. I think at their top end, when they are playing well, I think they're one of the better teams in all of Americas. I think they can kind of compete with anybody. Obviously, they've beaten Leviatan, who we'll talk more about later, but they're definitely at the top. Moving on to EG NRG. EG is making a bit of a run here. Like, don't look now, but after really a very tough start, I guess they did get G2, but I think we all agreed that there was a chance they were going to get the first one because nobody knew what EG was going to come with. No strats, completely new roster. They were going to be unexpected. And G2 had a ton of film out on how they wanted to play maps. So that was a bad matchup for G2 that early in the season. Then they get beat by Loud. Then they get beat by G2, Cloud9, Kru, and we're like, EG's not very good. Well, hold on. It's a similar argument that we were just making for Loud in stage 1, right? This has been the regular season. They played their 5 games so far. G2 we think is okay. Cloud9 we think can beat anybody. And Kru is pretty good. So all of a sudden, don't look now, but EG might be better than we think they are. And Potter is building a team, and I don't know, hold your horses. This is kind of what we saw EG do last year, and they ended up being world champions. Started slow, struggled. A bunch of players that people weren't sure if they really fit. Practice, more games, few positive meta changes potentially. I know there were meta changes today. We're not going to go over that because we don't really talk about that on this channel, but we'll see how it affects this week's matchups. But we'll see how it affects matchups going forward once they start playing the new patch. But I don't know. EG starting to look interesting. They 2-1 Sentinels. Gutsy performance. And they 2-1 NRG. Is EG starting to become interesting? I don't know. Keep your eyes on them. It's starting to feel a lot like last season. It really is. And then, to end it out, we had my most anticipated match of the week, and the one we'll probably spend the most time talking on. 100 Thieves and Kru. I said last week, you can go watch the video. When I ranked 100 Thieves here and Kru here, I said, I just haven't seen Kru win against any of the top teams. At this point, they had only beaten these lower teams. Yes, they were undefeated, but it was against teams that we thought were probably not very good. So I put them as 3, because I just said, until they beat somebody who I think is pretty legit, I'm going to have 100 Thieves ahead of them. But I said, I have no problem when this happens, dropping 100 Thieves down and putting Kru up there. I just needed a good marquee win. Yes, the win over Loud was good, but we were starting to think Loud had gone on a bit of a losing streak. Were they as good as we thought they were? I think they are still pretty good. Kru gets a big win over 100 Thieves. Now, it wasn't a complete blowout. It is a 2-1. Kru get the first map, 13-7. To go up 6-0, it was looking rough there if you were a 100 Thieves fan. You were scared. And a dominant final performance, winning the final 6 rounds. Then on Breeze, very close game, back and forth. 100 Thieves gets that map. Then back on Split, a bit back and forth. 100 Thieves were a bit streaky there in the first half, but Kru got it done in the end. If you look at the KDs across all maps, there's a good mixture here. Again, it's not a huge blowout. Bustio did seem to struggle from a KD perspective, and he is the IGL, so we're more worried about his calling and how he's doing with that than necessarily the KD. But normally, Bustio looks a little better than that. 0.58's pretty low for him. Asuna struggled at times. If you look at Sunset, again, Bustio and Asuna, Bustio really struggled on Sunset. Breeze, again, still bottom of the board. Asuna actually played much better on Split, was probably his best map. It was interesting. It was interesting to see. Cryo really is starting to play very, very well, be the player that we expected him to be. But in the end, just not enough from the whole team. Kru just kind of overall was a little bit better at pretty much every position on the field. That's really how I would say. I wouldn't say there was a huge difference, of, oh, Melzer was way better than anybody on 100 Thieves. It wasn't an off-spot situation where he just takes over and kills everybody, right? Kru was just the better team. They absolutely were. Top to bottom, they played better. Again, not a huge blowout. I mean, honestly, if you look at the top 3 KDs, it looks like 100 Thieves should have won, right? But then you see the bottom 2, Asuna and Bustio, had rough maps, man. They were dead a lot. And that's not something you typically expect, especially from Bustio. Asuna, sometimes on a raise, you might have a lot of deaths. But Kesnet played great. And that's a bit of a difference, right? Cryo playing the Jet was very dominant. Was he as great on Gecko or Astra? I'm not sure. So Kru looked good. I'll be honest. Kru looked very, very solid. And this is setting up an absolute banger on Saturday night. May 4th. Kru Leviatan. Again, we're almost done with regular season. This is the last weekend. We have some huge bangers. Friday, can Sentinels get some confidence back, get back on track by beating Furia, who we don't think is very good? I think that'll be good for them. Saturday, 100 Thieves NRG. Bustio playing against Demon 1 and Ethan. They're all former world champions last season on the same team. The team broke up, coming at each other. There's some spicy words being exchanged. Should be fun. Should be a lot of fun. And then the nightcap, so to speak, the 5 p.m. matchup. This is the matchup. I really do believe these are the top 2 teams in Americas. Both from Argentina. Obviously, not all their players are from Argentina. But organizationally, they are. Bit of a rivalry there. And probably the top 2 teams. This is gonna be a banger. I cannot wait for this game. It is going to be so good. Setting up a title fight, so to speak. Maybe a preview of who wins playoffs, right? I believe both teams are already qualified, guaranteed playoff spots. So hopefully they won't save strats. The beauty of there being championship points on the line in every one of these regular season games. And remember, championship points are one of the main ways you qualify at the end of the season for the World Championships. Getting into that tournament, you have to have enough championship points. You can get it a lot of different ways. Sentinels was way ahead of everybody, but they've had a rough regular season. So, Kru and Leviatan, this is going to be important for championship points. So I would expect both teams to be playing full strats full capabilities. I don't think they're going to be hiding anything. I don't think they're saving anything for playoffs. They want that championship point. They don't want to give it up. They don't want to give it up to another team that is looking to maybe be their rival for getting into playoffs, right? And then I think we got some clarifying games. I think Cloud9 will beat MIBR. G2 Loud, I think, is a great matchup within the midfield. We're going to get some clarity, I think. How good is G2? How good is Loud? Both of them have had some decent wins. Both of them have had some pretty rough losses. So we'll have to see. And that brings me, real quick here at the end of the video, let's look at, this is what I had rankings at the end of last week. Okay? How am I moving people around? Well, definitely moving Kru over 100 Thieves. Okay? I think Leviatan stays. They didn't play this week, so, you know, you might have forgotten about them. But what they've shown this season, I still got Leviatan number 1. They have the best player in all of Americas. I would argue the best player in Valorant, and I would argue the greatest player of all time in Valorant and OSPAS. And lately, the rest of the team has been cooking as well. King's a solid IGL. So, leave Leviatan at 1. Move Kru to 2. Absolutely. They're undefeated. They're undefeated. You got to put them at 2. Some might say you got to put them at 1, but I just, watching it, I think it's going to be hard to beat Leviatan. And if you saw the betting odds that were there, kind of on VLR there, the casinos are agreeing with me. Leviatan is the favorite. Now, what to do with kind of this midfield? You know, I don't trust Cloud9, but I do think I might need to give them a little more credit. Like, I don't trust them. They dropped a map to Furia, but, you know, Sentinels got beat again. They did. Sentinels lost to Loud 2-0. NRG lost again to EG. So, I realistically think you got to put Cloud9 4. Again, Cloud9's the one team that's beaten Leviatan here. So, you got to drop NRG and Sentinels, I think. You got to give Cloud9 credit for winning. Even if, you know, they line up against Sentinels, I'm not sure. They line up against NRG tomorrow, I'm not sure. I've got some concerns. But we're going to see him against MIBR. I don't know if that's going to tell us a whole lot. I'm going to do some interesting things here in the midfield. This little pack from 5th to 9th, super intriguing to me. And I'm putting EG in there because, you know what? They've won. They're beating these teams. I don't know really how to order this. It feels really tight. And this is something we said coming into the season. That VCT Americas definitely looks like the deepest region. Like, I don't know if there's a whole lot separating the top teams from the bottom teams. NRG has not played out as well as we thought they were. G2's made some interesting roster changes. I think based off of what we've seen, I don't know where to move Sentinels, but they keep losing. So we're going to move them down. Right? It feels bad to put Sentinels above Loud, I'll be honest. It does. It feels bad when Loud 2-0'd them. Like, that's legitimate. Yes, they were the underdogs on the betting favorites, but all of a sudden here, Loud gets a win. And when you look at the teams they've lost to, it's Cloud9 and Kru. Those are good teams. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to do something like this. I'm sorry, Sentinels. I might even do this. As they're playing right now, I mean, let's take a look at it. Sentinels, they lost to EG. And EG has continued. It doesn't feel like a fluke. They just beat NRG. This might be how I'm sitting. It's tough with NRG because they keep losing as well. So, is this really where we're sitting at? Again, I think this 5th through 9th is real tight right now. And if Sentinels can find their mojo back, they're going to go right back up to 1st. Like, they've obviously shown they can play at the high level. But right now, today, with what we've seen in the last few weeks, Sentinels is seriously struggling. To me, it feels like you've got the top 4, and I think there's some arguments to be made that Leviatan is separated a little bit since losing to Cloud9, that was a bit of a wake-up call for him. But it definitely feels kind of top 2, then 3 and 4, and those 3 and 4 can absolutely compete with Kru and Leviatan. I mean, we saw 100 Thieves got a map. Cloud9 beat Leviatan, right? Those are close games. So top 4 feel to me at this moment like they've separated a little bit. A little bit. But I would make an argument that 3rd through 9th can feel like a toss-up at any moment. Top 2 maybe separated. 3rd through 9th definitely feel like at any moment. But I do think 3 and 4, Cloud9 I think can beat anybody on their best day. 100 Thieves dismantled Cloud9 and played Kru tough. And I think Kru's pretty darn good. So I do think there's a bit of a pack here. Maybe 1, 2, then 3, 4. But this 5 through 9, I don't know what to do with them. There's a lot of ups and downs, lefts and rights. I mean, if you look at G2, you know, what do you do with them? They got 2-0'd by 100 Thieves. This is why I think 100 Thieves is up there. That's one of the reasons. But they 2-0'd EG to start the regular season, avenging their loss in kickoffs. Then they beat Furia, not very good. They took a map off of Leviatan, who's the best team in America, as we think. And then they 2-0'd MIBR. So again, this midsection, we said, G2 Loud, that's going to be a really solid matchup because we're going to find out, does G2 belong at the top of the midfield or kind of just in the middle? This is where I've got it. Let me know in the comments down below where you would rank all of these teams. Where am I out of pocket? I think MIBR and Furia, I don't know if there's going to be much complaining about that. I mean, those two teams are really struggling at the moment. They're the bottom 2. There's definitely a difference between 10th and 11th and 9th and above. That's probably the biggest gap, I think, in this league. The bottom 2 are definitely the bottom 2. Let me know in the comments down below what you're most excited for this weekend. I cannot wait for Leviatan Kru. We'll definitely be talking about it next week after it happens, and we'll see you then.